I used to go to a very small private Catholic school. It was and still is the third, I'm pretty sure, oldest school in America. It dates back to the 1700s. Since they were still very old-fashioned, we were forced to clap erasers outside. I had to go with this deadbeat boy in my class who was seemingly not afraid of anything. Everything was fine for the first few minutes until I started hearing a voice. Hi there. Just constantly being repeated in a little girl's voice. We turned to each other in horror and realised we were both hearing it. The windows in the school were completely closed. No one else was outside. Not to mention that even if it was a fellow student who got out, I would have recognised their voice. The school had barely any kids, so I knew everyone. This taunting continued for at least 5 minutes, while we stood frozen until we ran back inside and told the teacher. We were of course chastised for believing in the paranormal, and she wrote it off to kids being kids. After that, our class considered the school haunted, and honestly, I think the possibility is very high. There were always odd things going on in the school. It was built on the remains of a cemetery, and I had heard many stories of deaths and suicides near or on the property. With 300 years of use, something must have happened on that land. This is actually a true scary story that happened to my stepdad before I was born. It may not be scary, but it sure is creepy. Anyway, my stepdad lived in a house that his sister now owns, and lived in there with his sister and father. It always seems a creepy house, and there's this creepy doll that is still there to this day that my cousin loves. But that's a story for another day. Anyways, he told me one night he was home alone with his 2 dogs, Nelson and Jada, and was getting ready for bed. With Nelson by his side, he was drifting off to sleep when he heard, "Good night, Jeffrey, I love you." He said good night back, but then realised that his mom just talked to him. She died a few years ago from cancer. He wasn't going crazy because he recalls Nelson's ears picking up, signalling to him that Nelson had heard it too. He got up and checked the whole house, thinking that maybe he mistook his sister's voice for his mother's. Nothing. To this day, he still insists that he was awake and it wasn't a dream. So this happened when I was much younger. I've only told maybe 2 people. It was just such an odd experience. I never knew how to even tell it. So I was young, maybe 11 or 12, and for whatever fucked up reason, me and my siblings wanted to do a Ouija board. My dad got us one. I don't think he even understood what exactly it was. Well, anyway, I was with 2 of my friends and we were having a sleepover at my house. So we whip out the old Ouija board and start attempting to make contacts. My grandma had passed away only 6 months earlier. I had never really gotten to know her because she lived in Texas. I lived in Michigan. Well, sure enough, we make contact with someone who claims to be my grandma. The annoying thing about Ouija boards is odds are your friends are just moving the piece and just messing with you. So I started getting personal. I asked personal questions about my family that my dumbass 11-year-old friends would never know. Every question I asked, the board answered correctly, so I was tripping. Then it begins to bring up my grandma's husband. I say it because I don't believe it was my grandma. I believe it was a demon of some sort. My grandma's husband had gotten into a serious relationship almost immediately after my grandma had passed. My family was pretty weirded out by it. So after the series of personal questions, the bard then begins to say the woman's name over and over, the woman who is dating her husband. The Ouija board at this point is being ruthless, saying things like bitch, slut. Now, we weren't the kind of kids to ever say things like that, and I truly believe it wasn't my friends. I finally asked the bard, "What do you want from me?" And I swear to God, shit you not, it just says, "Kill her." I flipped. We immediately stopped playing, and I cried like a bitch. I still am just super creeped out by the whole thing. A super creepy thing I found out later was that the woman my grandma's husband was dating was horribly allergic to pepper. She'd made a pan of brownies at the house that my grandma had owned, the woman that moved into it shortly after my grandma's death. Well, anyway, she got up the next day and the brownies were completely covered in pepper. Is my grandma just ruthless as fuck? Was it a demon? Or my friends? Who knows, but it still blows my mind. This happened when I was only 16. I was with my father. We went to Yellowstone National Park. We went on a hike into the forest. My dad thought it was a good idea to go off trail just a little bit to see if we could see some deer. So I said, sure, let's go. We head off into the forest. We probably walked for hours and we didn't see anything or hear anything. And I'm being serious. Not even a bird sound or the wind. It started to get dark, so we start to hike back, but we were lost. It's got dark really fast, so my dad told me we should camp for the night and head back tomorrow. I said, okay, that's fine. We set up camp, which wasn't much, just a fire. As we sat by the fire, we heard this scream just out of nowhere. It sounded like a girl screaming at the top of her lungs. What my dad didn't tell me was he'd brought his .44 Magnum with him. He told me to stay put, so I did. It's been about 20 minutes since he left. I'm getting really bored. All of a sudden, I see a figure coming out of the woods. It's hunched over, it has antlers, and it's tall, like 7-8 feet tall, and its arms are really long. It walked up to me, it sat down, its eyes were black out, it looked at me and started whispering something. As it started, my dad came running out of the wood and shot the monster. It screamed just like the one we'd heard earlier in the day, and it ran at my dad. My dad took another shot at the monster. It jumped clean over my dad, and my dad's a big guy, at about 6'5", so he's pretty big. After the monster ran back into the woods, my dad grabbed me and we ran. We finally found our way back and we hopped in the car and took off. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it in daylight. It looked just like a Wendigo. It screamed one more time and it ran away. That's the last time I go to the woods.